Imagine this. Predator is for kids now. The monster we used to fear and hate has turned into a nice guy. How did a franchise about the most brutal and bloodthirsty hunters in the universe end up becoming family entertainment? Is this a betrayal of the series? Or just a natural step in its evolution? Now I'm going to walk you through all the films about the Yautja race. Take a look at the comics and the books, the crossovers with Alien, and together with you, try to figure out, where is the Predator universe heading? Toward a revival or a full-blown failure? Hi, this is 11 Slate and the ultimate history of Predator. So, how did the idea of a race of aliens obsessed with hunting even come about? Just like Alien was born, in part because of John Carpenter. And RoboCop owes a lot to Blade Runner, something I will definitely get into in future videos. Predator, believe it or not, was inspired by Rocky movies. Yes, after Sylvester Stallone's character defeated Ivan Drago in the fourth film, and even earned applause from Gorbachev himself. People started joking that Rocky had beaten everyone on Earth, so naturally his next opponent should be an alien. Two up-and-coming screenwriter brothers, Jim and John Thomas, actually took that idea seriously and started thinking about a movie where a heavily built action hero, a very popular archetype in 1980s action films, would face off against a brutal alien. That is how the first draft of the script called Hunter was born. It would later be renamed Predator to avoid confusion with a TV show of the same name that was airing at the time. At first, this was just another action script from unknown writers. So, most studios passed on it without a second thought. Until, by pure chance, it ended up in the hands of producer Joel Silver. He had just finished working on Commando with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and clearly understood the box office power of muscle-bound heroes firing in every direction. Silver saw potential in what looked like a trashy sci-fi action idea and decided to turn it into a big-budget blockbuster. For the lead role, they brought in the Austrian Oak himself, who had basically become a money magnet by that point. The script was expanded, adding even more muscle-bound macho guys. In the very first version, Schwarzenegger was supposed to face the alien alone, but now he had company. Carl Weathers joined him, Apollo Creed from Rocky. Bill Duke, who played Arnold's enemy in Commando, was now on his team. Then you add wrestler Jesse Ventura, former soldier Richard Chavez, experienced action actor Sonny Landham, and the screenwriter of Lethal Weapon, Shane Black. And what is he doing here? Well, at the same time as Predator, Joel Silver was working on the first Lethal Weapon, and was very impressed with Black's talent. So he brought him onto Predator in case the script needed adjustments. Black plays the radio operator Hawkins, cracks dirty jokes, and becomes the first one to die. To justify why he's even part of the team, they even added a scene showing how fast his reactions are. So, the main characters are a squad of mercenaries who specialize in rescue missions. They follow their own moral code, so they refuse to take on assassination jobs. To use them anyway, CIA agent Dylan, played by Weathers, tricks them into going into the jungles of Central America, where supposedly a helicopter carrying an unnamed foreign minister has crashed. The country itself is never clearly identified. You see a map of Brazil, the political situation hints at Nicaragua or Guatemala, but the exact location does not really matter. In reality, their mission is to wipe out a guerrilla camp and Soviet military advisors. There was no minister. Instead, another mercenary unit led by Dutch's friend has gone missing. In the jungle, the team encounters a mysterious extraterrestrial creature that has come to these hot regions to hunt. At this point, we know absolutely nothing about it, and we learn about the enemy alongside Dutch Schaefer's squad.
If it bleeds, we can kill it.
The look of the Predator was created by special effects legend Stan Winston. He had already worked on James Cameron's Terminator, contributed to John Carpenter's The Thing, and would soon win an Oscar for Aliens and receive a nomination for Predator. He wanted to design something very different from the usual Alien, combining elements from various Earth cultures. And yes, James Cameron himself had a hand in it. At one point, he told Winston he would love to see a creature with mandibles, those external jaws that many insects have. Winston took that idea and reworked the original dog-like design into what we now know. Originally, they wanted the Predator to be a martial arts expert, so they cast a young Jean-Claude Van Damme, a karate champion. But once filming started, problems came up. First, Van Damme was not happy with the role at all. He thought he would be a full-fledged antagonist to Arnold, but in reality, he was just a stunt performer in a rubber suit. Second, despite his physical condition, he kept passing out in the heat of the costume. And third, he was only about 5'10", which made the terrifying alien noticeably shorter than the rest of the cast. So the future action star left the project. Although according to director John McTiernan, some shots with him still made it into the final film. That is him in the red suit, which was used to later add the camouflage effect against the jungle. They replaced him with Kevin Peter Hall, who stood at about 7 foot 2 inches, and was used to performing in full-body suits. He had played Harry the Bigfoot in Harry and the Hendersons. As a reward for his dedication, Hall was given a chance to show his face in the finale. He plays the helicopter pilot, the same chopper Arnie yells to run to in his iconic line, "Get to the chopper!" And the Predator's voice was created by the incredible voice actor Peter Cullen, best known as Optimus Prime in many versions of Transformers, from the original animated series all the way to modern feature films. And speaking of get to the chopper, yes, Predator is one of those action movies where the heroes constantly drop iconic one-liners. At one point, Dutch says he is not a killer, he's a rescuer. And then a couple of scenes later,
Knock, knock.
and my favorite one,
Stick around.
that moment was actually added just to get rid of Dutch's giant machete, which kept getting in the way during action scenes. And Schwarzenegger improvised the line himself. The man is a master of one-liners.
Hasta la vista, baby.
Predator 1987 is pure, hardcore, masculine 1980s action. Machismo is everywhere.
You're hit. You're bleeding, man.
I ain't got time to bleed.
All the characters are incredibly tough, and in the very first action sequence, they wipe out dozens of enemies. That is important. It shows their skill level and their version of a moral code, as it was seen in 80s action films. And then the movie introduces an opponent who can easily take them out one by one. So, what do we know about the Predator at this point? Well, it's clearly an alien. The film opens with its ship arriving. Its species has been visiting these jungles for a long time. As Anna, the local woman played by Elpidia Carrillo, says, her people have told stories about it for generations. The creature prefers heat, most likely because it sees the world in infrared and tracks body heat, which honestly does not make hunting easier in a hot climate. And if you remember the Antarctic setting from Alien vs. Predator, temperature clearly is not that important. So let's just assume that part is more myth than fact. The real key factor is the presence of dangerous prey. That is why predators tend to show up in hot zones, and not because of the weather. Their hunting code forbids them from killing the unarmed, pregnant women, or children. So, the easiest way to survive an encounter is not to fight and not to show aggression. If the predator finds a worthy opponent, it will drop its advanced weapons and fight hand-to-hand. It wears a helmet that enhances its vision, and as later films show, it can switch between different modes. In terms of weapons, the first Predator uses sharp blades and a shoulder-mounted plasma cannon with its signature triple laser sight. And that is just the beginning. Its arsenal will grow in future films. The creature can mimic human voices, carries a medical kit, and even has a small nuclear device for self-destruction, a dramatic way to go out if it's dishonored. And of course, the camouflage. It not only confuses its victims, but even fooled the Academy into nominating the film for Best Visual Effects largely because of it. Although the creature's design itself easily deserved a nomination for makeup. Ironically, despite being so stealthy, the Predator bleeds bright green blood, almost like evolution is punishing it. If you get wounded, you are weak. And now your glowing blood makes it even easier for your enemies to track you. What really makes the film work is the antagonist. The Predator is memorable with its own rules, culture, and purpose. Not just killing everything, but proving its superiority over strong opponents. And despite being a relatively straightforward movie, it is very well written. There are multiple subplots that develop the characters and make you care about them. The dynamic between Billy and Hawkins, the conflict between Dutch and Dylan, the friendship between Blaine and Mac. Personally, I think Bill Duke delivers the best performance of his career here.
I drew down a fire straight at it, capped off 200 rounds in the minigun, full pack. Nothing. Nothing on this earth could have lived.
Alongside Dutch, the audience tries to figure out how to defeat the creature and discovers that it cannot see targets covered in mud.
He couldn't see me.
And the moment when the Predator removes its mask is unforgettable.
You're one ugly motherfucker.
This is a perfectly crafted action movie. It was well written, then young director John McTiernan came in and elevated it. And Alan Silvestri created a score that sticks with you and keeps showing up in future films. But Schwarzenegger had a different take. According to him, Predator became a hit and made $98 million on an $18 million budget simply because it had a lot of muscular guys in it. That was his explanation. The shoot itself turned into a festival of pure masculinity. The actors would wake up in the middle of the night just to train more before filming. They compared biceps, competed in endurance, all that.
What's the matter? The CIA got you pushing too many pencils? Huh?
Meanwhile, Shane Black used his free time to write The Last Boy Scout, while everyone else was working out. And interestingly, 3 actors from the film would go on to have political careers. Arnold Schwarzenegger became the governor of California, Jesse Ventura became the governor of Minnesota, and Sonny Landham ran for governor of Kentucky. He did not win, but he stayed active in politics for years. And one of my favorite details? There is a scene where Dutch asks Billy what he sees in the jungle. Look at how focused they are. Absolute concentration. Despite the fact that the entire crew had food poisoning from contaminated water in Mexico where the film was shot. The moment they heard cut, they all ran straight to the bathroom. But in the shot, not a single muscle twitches. That is an Oscar-worthy performance right there. The box office success showed that a new pop culture icon had been born, one that seemed easy to develop further, change the setting, explore the Predator's culture. But first, the idea of a sequel was tested in comic form, which would later become the foundation for the second film. In 1989, Predator got a continuation in comics. The story moves to an unusually hot New York City. The main character is Dutch's brother. Arnie's character mysteriously disappeared after the events of the first film. Another blonde, muscular guy. You can easily imagine someone like Dolph Lundgren in that role. He works as a cop in the middle of a gang war, which of course attracts new predators to the city. The idea of moving the alien hunt into a new setting appealed to the producers. And work began on a full sequel. John McTiernan was too busy, so they brought in Stephen Hopkins, who had just directed A Nightmare on Elm Street 5. He was given a $30 million budget and very little time to shoot. Arnold Schwarzenegger did not return to his iconic role either. He was filming Kindergarten Cop. Fair enough, and to be honest, Terminator 2 was already on the horizon. No one would say no to Terminator 2. So, producer Joel Silver leaned on his connections and brought in a star from another one of his hit franchises, Lethal Weapon's Danny Glover. Other options were considered first, Patrick Swayze, but he was recovering from an injury he got on Roadhouse. Then they looked at another action star, Steven Seagal. That fell apart over creative differences. The producers wanted a regular cop as the lead, while Seagal insisted on playing a CIA psychiatrist who also happened to be a martial arts expert. So that did not work out. And that is how we got Danny Glover. I like him as an actor, and his role as Roger Murtaugh is a perfect fit. But in Predator 2, he feels slightly out of place. His character is supposed to be tough and unstoppable, but after Lethal Weapon, it is hard to fully buy into that image.
Hey, asshole!
Especially at the end when he defeats the Predator in close combat. Arnie had to outsmart the creature and drop a log on it. While here, Sergeant Murtaugh just takes down a space hunter. It does feel a bit strange.
I'm too old for this shit.
Part of that shift actually comes from John McTiernan himself. In 1988, he directed Die Hard with Bruce Willis, which introduced a more grounded kind of action hero. That started a trend away from overly muscular leads toward more relatable characters.
It's all right, I'm a cop.
I don't think he gives a shit.
So the story takes place 10 years after the first film. Los Angeles is torn apart by gang wars. Everyone carries a gun because they're afraid for their lives. Perfect hunting grounds for an alien warrior. Top cop Mike Harrigan, played by Danny Glover, encounters the Predator during a shootout with a Colombian drug cartel. Fun detail, the actor Henry Kingi, whom Harrington kills on a rooftop, also appeared in the first Predator. He's the guy who explodes in the truck. You could spin a theory that he somehow survived, moved to the US, and now the Predator is hunting down the remaining witnesses, or you could just not overthink it. Harrington tries to figure out who is killing gangsters by the dozens and runs into a mysterious government organization that clearly knows more than it is saying. It's led by Keyes, played by Gary Busey. That role was originally meant for Schwarzenegger. The idea was that Dutch had spent years tracking predators around the world and would eventually team up with Glover's character. But once Arnie was out, Joel Silver again turned to the Lethal Weapon cast and gave the role to one of that film's villains. And it is pretty funny to see Steve Kahan, who played Captain Murphy in Lethal Weapon, Riggs and Murtaugh's boss, now showing up here as a lower-ranking SWAT officer. According to the novelization, Dutch suffered heavy radiation exposure but later disappeared from the hospital, most likely escaping. That is where this trail ends for a long time. Before the modern reboot era, he only appeared once more, in the Alien vs. Predator video game for the Super Nintendo. There, Dutch becomes a cyborg, lives another 100 years, and teams up with predators to fight xenomorphs. Honestly, I can believe that version. For a brief moment, we also see Anna, the other survivor from the Jungle Massacre. And that is pretty much where continuity ends. Gangsters and police officers start dying and the secret organization fails to contain the predator. One of the victims is Rookie Lambert, played by Bill Paxton, also Hudson from Aliens and the punk from the original Terminator, which makes Paxton the first actor in history to be killed by an alien, a predator, and a Terminator.
I stabbed that son of a bitch plenty of times. He never died on me before.
Yes, the first, but not the only one. I won't reveal others just yet. Drop your guesses in the comments below. There is even a comic called Alien vs. Predator vs. Terminator, and at this point it feels like those three iconic monsters are just competing to get to Bill Paxton first. We'll come back to that later. By the way, the subway massacre where Lambert dies was directly taken from the 1989 comic I mentioned earlier. The idea of armed civilians trapped in a confined space really appealed to the creators. Although the scene itself is shot in near darkness with flickering lights, which makes it not exactly the most cinematic sequence.
I have to apologize again for the fluorescent lights. I think it's a bad transformer.
Now, let's talk about the new Predator. His arsenal has expanded. He now uses a spear, a new gun that fires metal spikes, an additional wrist-mounted weapon, a smart throwing disc, and a net launcher. For now, the net only immobilizes its targets. It will turn into a full-blown slicing trap later. Overall, this Predator feels very different from the first one. He is better equipped, more aggressive, and clearly enjoys the hunt, even showing off Bill Paxton's skull. And yes, I almost forgot, as true hunters, predators collect trophies, skulls and skinned bodies of their victims. But this time, the city hunter feels almost like a teenager, impulsive, arrogant, and constantly pushing boundaries.
You are one ugly motherfucker.
He follows the code and spares a pregnant woman, Leona, played by Maria Conchita Alonso. But he is clearly tempted to shoot a kid with a toy gun. He even scans the child just to confirm he is not a threat. This predator is still learning. He has not fully mastered the rules of the hunt yet. As later stories reveal, hunting on other planets is not just a hobby, it's a rite of passage for adult Yautja. When the city hunter is finally killed by Harrigan, the elders arrive. And instead of killing him, they let him go and reward him with a trophy, a pistol from the early 18th century, which tells us something very important. Predators have been visiting Earth for centuries, and that opens the door for endless sequels. Predators vs. Vikings, Predators during the Crusades, Predators in World War II. You can play with settings forever. It is a very smart move, leaving the door open just enough for future stories. But the most important detail appears among the trophies aboard the Predator ship.
A f***ing alien.
Yes, that is a xenomorph skull. Both franchises belong to Fox. And around the time of Predator 2, they started seriously considering a crossover. Predators love extreme challenges, so why not have them breed aliens for hunting? First, in a Dark Horse anthology, a short story introduced the idea. Then the crossover grew into a full comic series and eventually killed Predator 3. The reason is simple. With a $30 million budget, the second film made only $57 million. That is considered a failure.
Shit happens.
Meanwhile, interest in Alien vs. Predator kept growing. The comics became a big hit, so all efforts shifted toward turning that crossover into a blockbuster, a process that would take 10 years. If we wrap up Predator 2, it is a decent movie with some clear direction problems, a trash-talking predator, and Danny Glover is an unstoppable action hero.
I'm too old for this shit.
Sorry, I still can't fully buy that. The film is more violent and even had to be edited down to avoid the harshest rating. But violence alone does not bring audiences to theaters. Still, it gave us one amazing thing, a promo where Danny Glover dances with predators on their spaceship. Absolutely priceless. It would take 14 years before the next film. But during that time, a huge number of Predator comics were released, greatly expanding the lore, giving the species its official name and explaining their conflict with the aliens in detail. So now, let's talk about the adventures of these cosmic hunters in the comics, and how the Alien vs. Predator crossover was born. The Predator comics evolved in a pretty natural way. Each new series placed the alien in a different setting, hunting American soldiers at a desert base, underwater battles with divers, or fights in the far north. In one of those stories, Dutch's brother returns. He teams up with a Soviet soldier to take on a predator in northern Russia. Some comic runs focused on the hunters operating in the past, during World War I, in the Wild West, or in feudal Japan. One miniseries even explains how the predator got that pistol from the end of the second movie. It's simple. A human ally gives it to him during a pirate conflict. But the real breakout hit was the crossover that pits predators against xenomorphs. I'm sure you've already watched the full breakdown of the Alien franchise on my channel. If not, well, you know what to do after this video to piece together the full story of these connected universes.
Get away from her, you bitch!
The first major story about the alien conflict introduces a key character, Machiko Noguchi. She is the leader of a small colony on the planet Ryushi, where predators arrive to hunt aliens. They did not expect to find humans there. Machiko proves her worth, earns the mark of a blooded hunter, and ends up living among the predators, giving readers a deeper look into their culture. We learn their true name, Yautja, and that their homeworld is called Yautja Prime. Their species was once known as the Hishkuten. They possess advanced technology that allows them to travel between planets in search of worthy prey. Hunting is the core of their existence. While the males roam the galaxy proving themselves, the females stay on the homeworld and raise the young. First, adolescents prove themselves against dangerous life forms, and only after that do they face aliens. The Yautja deliberately breed facehuggers, release them onto random planets, and then hunt the resulting xenomorphs to earn the title of Blooded, meaning they have killed a xenomorph and marked themselves with its acidic blood. That ritual marks their transition into adulthood. Beyond Machiko's storyline, the Yautja and the xenomorphs meet in modern times, on space stations, and even on a version of Earth that has been cleared of aliens. I talked about that in my previous video about the ultimate history of the alien universe, the one where a cult of xenomorph enthusiasts accidentally destroys our planet. Some of the Alien vs. Predator comic lines continue that exact storyline. Sometimes predators step outside that conflict and get involved in even stranger crossovers. They fight Batman, Judge Dredd, Tarzan, and Archie. Yes, that Archie from Riverdale. And in a smaller series called Alien vs. Predator vs. Terminator, we get new adventures of Ellen Ripley and the android call after Alien Resurrection from 1997. It turns out this story takes place after Skynet has already been defeated, although for some reason no one in the Alien universe seems to remember that. The AI leaves behind a way to return in the form of a virus. New, more human-like Terminators appear and decide to merge themselves with aliens. Yes, it gets pretty wild, but what else would you expect from a comic with that title? The Predators get involved, and eventually they even accept a genetically modified Ripley into their ranks. At that point, honestly, she's earned it. As you can see, the franchise experimented heavily in comics for years, while the studio kept trying to launch an Alien vs. Predator movie. Those plans ended up killing Predator 3 and Alien 5. The directors of the first two Alien films, Ridley Scott and James Cameron, were openly against the crossover idea. Sigourney Weaver joined them, saying she wanted nothing to do with it. Cameron would later soften his stance and actually enjoy the crossover, but Ridley Scott remained strongly opposed. He argued that Alien was no longer interesting in its current form and needed to evolve, that he had no intention of watching a crossover designed purely as fan service. So he went on a different direction and made Prometheus. But 8 years before that, in 2004, the long-awaited film that brings these iconic space monsters together finally reached the screen. And it was directed by Paul W.S. Anderson, who by that time had already earned a solid following with audiences. He proved he could make simple, almost bare-bones action movies that are still spectacular and genuinely entertaining. Some of them were even based on video games like Mortal Kombat and Resident Evil. By the way, great candidates for future Ultimate History videos. Should I make one on them? Let me know in the comments below. So, ever since the second Predator movie, a couple of well-received shooters had come out, letting players take control of aliens, predators, or marines. So it's no surprise Anderson felt completely at home here. As a result, the long-awaited crossover did not turn into a horror film or a grand sci-fi epic, but into a fast-paced corridor-style shooter, just like the video games intended. For years, Fox tried to find the perfect story for Alien vs. Predator, something exciting and engaging, but also relatively cheap. Paul Anderson's idea, heavily inspired by H.P. Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness, fit perfectly. That story also deals with ancient creatures hidden beneath the ice of Antarctica. Although the budget eventually climbed to a solid $70 million, the director simply did not want to rely on CGI for everything. He chose to focus on practical effects, which are not cheap. To cut costs, the story was moved into the present day, no futuristic sets or costumes. The main location became the underground chambers of an ancient pyramid discovered in Antarctica. Again, a smart way to save money. To make the otherwise dull setting more dynamic, the pyramid constantly reconfigures itself every 10 minutes. Very much in the spirit of the movie Cube. The plot follows a terminally ill founder of the future Weyland-Yutani Corporation. Yes, that Weyland, who gathers a group of scientists to explore structures built by an ancient race in a remote region. He briefs them only after arrival, rushes them into an unknown location without addressing basic safety concerns. And the entire team behaves incredibly unprofessionally, ultimately dying after encountering ancient aliens. Wait, hold on. A terminally ill founder of Weyland-Yutani gathers scientists to study ancient alien structures in a remote location? He rushes them in without proper precautions and then they all die because of their own incompetence? Yes, that is basically the exact plot of Prometheus, which would come out about 8 years later. And as we all know, Ridley Scott did not watch Anderson's film. Maybe he should have. He might have noticed a few issues in his own movie. The key difference between Alien vs. Predator and Prometheus is that in Anderson's film, the dumb characters who do not listen to each other actually feel somewhat natural within a fun action movie.
No! No! Don't touch them!
In Ridley Scott's existential prequel, they feel completely out of place. But sure, let's say it's all just a coincidence. Weyland is played by Lance Henriksen, who previously played the android Bishop in Aliens, so a century later, his likeness is used to create a robot. It's kinda like Apple making its first-round android with Steve Jobs' face. Say it out loud and it actually sounds believable. Then you remember that Henriksen also appeared in Alien 3 as a man claiming to be Bishop's creator, a descendant of the company's founder who looks exactly the same. Notice how the original Weyland fidgets with a pencil the same way Bishop plays with a knife in Cameron's film? It suggests that even personality traits were transferred into the android programming. And just a bit of foreshadowing, Charles Bishop Weyland, that is his full name, will be killed by a predator. Which means Lance Henriksen joins Bill Paxton in that exclusive club, presumably killed by a Terminator in a police station. Torn apart by the alien queen and now taken out by a predator, and he is not the last. The characters head to Antarctica where they discover a pyramid that combines elements of all major ancient civilizations. But it turns out to be a hunting ground designed to test young predators, allowing them to earn their blooded status. Every 100 years, 3 Yautja arrive and start producing alien eggs using a queen hidden beneath the ice. Judging by her size, she has been there for thousands of years, which makes it kind of ironic that Ripley spent her life trying to stop aliens from reaching Earth, when they have apparently been here all along. Predators have been coming here for centuries hunting aliens that humans who worship them helped cultivate. And this is where the questions start. Clearly the predators did not expect to find humans stealing their weapons. But how were they hunting here during the Ice Ages? Their human followers have not lived there for a very long time. In the sacrificial chamber, they find people who willingly allowed facehuggers to attach to them. Yet, on the surface, there was a whaling station. Could the predators have forced people into it? That does not really line up with other details. Why does some predator gear melt from alien blood while other pieces do not? Why does activating the pyramid require entering a date based on the Christian calendar? Do the Yautja follow our system of timekeeping now? The plot is full of holes, and if you look closely, it really does not hold up. But this is not the main point here. For the first time, aliens and predators finally clash on screen, and it is intense and visually exciting.
You are one ugly mother.
Characters, dialogue, and story come second. Ridley Scott was right when he said that the very idea of this crossover kills creativity and turns real cinema into cheap fan service action. And yes, that is true. But in Anderson's case, I have to admit that it's not that bad. Sometimes you can just enjoy something like this. Predators slice through humans and xenomorphs in style. Well, technically one predator does. The other 2 young Yautja are killed by the same alien, an absolutely unstoppable creature. As we know, xenomorphs inherit traits from their hosts. This one clearly came out of Chuck Norris. They even marked it with a cutting net just so we know who the toughest xenomorph is. Speaking of the net, it now slices victims into perfectly even cubes, which makes it especially fitting that this fate befalls Colin Salmon's character. You might ask, who's that? He's the guy who got diced into cubes by a laser grid in Resident Evil, also directed by Paul W.S. Anderson. The man really likes slicing and dicing salmon. See what I did there? The Predator's iconic disc was also redesigned. Anderson did not like its original look, so he replaced it with a more stylish shuriken. By the end, only one Predator, credited as Scar, earns his blooded mark, and teams up with Alexa Woods, played by Sana Lathan. Her character follows in the footsteps of Machiko Noguchi, a human who earns the blooded mark and is accepted by the Predators. She doesn't leave with them for Yautja Prime, which makes sense. Noguchi agreed to it because she was stranded on a hostile planet. Alexa is far from home too, but judging how confidently she heads toward a snowmobile in the finale, she clearly knows her way back. In the end, all the aliens and Predators die, and Scar dies in Alexa's arms. So the tagline, "Whoever wins, we lose," is not entirely accurate. Humans win, and if you overlook the rather slow first half, which tries to make you care about cardboard characters through basic dialogue, it turns out to be a decent piece of entertainment, with a strong tease for a sequel. It turns out Scar was already implanted with an alien, and aboard the Yautja ship, a Predalien is born. It had already appeared in comics back in 1995, and now it was finally making its way to the big screen. The film made $177 million, which gave the crossover another chance. I remember watching it in 2004 and really wanting a sequel. What can I say? Be careful what you wish for. To direct the sequel, they brought in the Strauss brothers, music video directors who had solid experience in visual effects, but had never made a full-length film before. So Fox decided to play it safe and cut the budget down to $40 million. Alien vs. Predator: Requiem picks up exactly where the first film left off. The Predalien kills the Predators on board and crash lands, along with a bunch of facehuggers in a small town in Colorado. Honestly, that's a pretty interesting setup. One of the defining traits of Predator movies is the constant change of setting. Jungle, big city, Antarctica, and now a quiet little town. To deal with the new alien threat and clean up the mess, they send in a seasoned Predator, one who even lost part of his upper mandible in previous battles. Before he arrives, we get a brief glimpse of the Yautja homeworld. It would be nice to learn more about it, but not yet. For the first time since the original, we are actually shown an experienced hunter, not a rookie, although to be fair, the original Predator might have been a beginner too, going through initiation, but he still looked far more professional than his successors. The crew nicknamed this Predator Wolf after Harvey Keitel's character from Pulp Fiction, a professional cleaner and problem solver, and that is exactly what he does. He moves through the town of Gunnison, erasing all traces of the aliens while leaving behind his own skinned trophies hanging around. Just look at how well he cleaned up that school. Not a single body. Sure, everything is covered in blood, but apparently that is not supposed to raise any questions. Wolf is equipped with a huge number of gadgets and brand new traps. Everything about him emphasizes his skill. And as the Strauss brothers themselves said, they have always loved the Predator more. So, the balance of power clearly leans in his favor. Oh right, there are a few other characters in the movie too. They all have some kind of backstory and a clear desire to be memorable, but it just doesn't work. The only ones worth mentioning are the annoying pizza guy played by David Hornsby, Cricket from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, a show I love, and the military character played by Reiko Aylesworth because I'm a fan of 24, and that is Michelle Dessler. Other than that, there are no standout characters. But the sequel does stand out in one very specific way: its absolute brutality. Characters die in droves, no one is safe. Gender, age, it doesn't matter. Even a pregnant woman in a hospital becomes a victim of the Predalien. And here's the twist: the hybrid is so powerful that it can implant multiple chest bursters directly into victims without using facehuggers. That is an interesting idea, but it completely breaks the established biology of xenomorphs. Even in the comics, Predaliens never did anything like that. The directors tried to explain it by saying that since the creature came from a predator, it is essentially a queen that has not started laying eggs yet. So it implants embryos directly. That explanation did not really convince fans either. But the main problem is not the weak story or the lore inconsistencies, the movie is just badly shot. Cinematographer Daniel Pearl criticized the first film for being too bright, saying it killed the horror. Yeah, very scary. So he made a movie where you can barely see anything at all. Then the editor chopped the story together like it was done with an axe. And the Strauss brothers looked at it and thought it was great. The film completely loses the dumb, fun energy of Anderson's version. Yes, it is darker, yes, it's much more violent, but it's just not engaging to watch. Toward the end, the characters contact the government, which decides not to bother saving civilians and simply nukes the town. There was supposed to be a cameo by Adam Baldwin, who worked with Gary Busey's character in Predator 2, but it didn't happen. It is kind of funny that the sequel to an Anderson film directed by someone else ends exactly the same way as another sequel to an Anderson film, also directed by someone else. Raccoon City was handled the same way in Resident Evil Apocalypse. Wolf and the Predalien mortally wound each other against the backdrop of a nuclear explosion, while the surviving characters escape in a helicopter, taking a Predator weapon with them. That weapon ends up in the hands of Miss Yutani, played by Francoise Yip.
This isn't for our world, is it, Miss Yutani?
The second half of A Wayland Yutani could have appeared in the first film, but they saved it for later to tease a third installment. The movie made $130 million but was completely destroyed by critics. Fox decided to step away from the crossover idea and move forward with Prometheus by Ridley Scott, which essentially erased Alien vs. Predator from the canon. It turns out xenomorphs were created shortly before the events of the first Alien, meaning predators could not have been hunting them in ancient times or in the 21st century. Personally, I think the crossovers fit more naturally into the evolution of the franchise than Scott's prequels. But that is more of an Alien discussion, which you can check out in a separate long video on my channel. Definitely watch it after this one. Now, back to Predator. The studio starts looking for a new direction, and suddenly, buried under layers of dust, they find a script that a young Robert Rodriguez had sent them all the way back in 1994. Yeah, Rodriguez actually tried to pitch his version of Predator 3 back in the 90s, but he was turned down. First, the idea of setting the hunt on another planet was just too expensive at the time. And second, the future big-name director was only just getting started. His major hits would come later. Now the situation had changed and Fox decided to move forward with Rodriguez's idea. He did not end up directing the film. Nimrod Antal took that role, but Rodriguez stepped in as a producer. I still can't quite understand why Antal was chosen to lead a reboot of such a major franchise. Both of his previous Hollywood films had underperformed, but there are rumors that the final creative decisions were still largely in Rodriguez's hands, and that he was way more involved than a typical producer. So Rodriguez was not a fan of the Predator movies that came after the original, whether they included aliens or not. That is why he positioned his film as the first true sequel to the 1987 classic. He even borrowed the naming idea from the Alien franchise. Remember how James Cameron stylized aliens with a $ like S? Same idea here. In 2010, we get Predators. Although, yeah, the $ trick did not quite work this time. But we'll get back to the box office later. So, here's the concept. It turns out predators do not just roam different worlds looking for a worthy prey. Sometimes they actually abduct the most dangerous individuals from various species and drop them onto a remote planet to hunt them. So, getting out of there is not as simple as just get to the chopper.
We're gonna need a new plan.
And it is not just humans. There are also completely new creatures. For example, the creatures run into this guy, whose design is based on the original Predator suit, the one that was supposed to be worn by a very unhappy Jean-Claude Van Damme. The movie does not waste time on setup. Right from the opening, the characters are falling into an unknown planet, and then they start introducing themselves, trying to figure out what's going on, and slowly learning about the enemy. Which basically means, yeah, there is still a lot of exposition. They tried to disguise that usual, often boring part of storytelling with a strong opening scene, but it does not fully work. So the main characters, mercenaries, soldiers, killers from different countries with very different moral codes. At the center is Royce, played by Adrian Brody. And honestly, I do not even know how this works, but it does. You would expect the same issue as with Danny Glover, where you're supposed to believe this is one of the deadliest men on Earth, and Brody is not exactly the first name that comes to mind. But here, somehow it clicks. The image of an action hero had already changed by that point. The big muscular guy stayed in the 80s, now the genre is ruled by more grounded, vulnerable characters. And Brody, with his very intelligent look, fits perfectly into that. Who says a professional soldier has to look like Schwarzenegger? The casting clearly aimed to be different from the original, and they pulled it off. Or maybe Adrian Brody is just a really good actor, and sometimes that's enough. That's up for debate. He is joined by a Yakuza member, a death row inmate, a mass murderer played, as always, brilliantly by Walton Goggins.
Is that your girlfriend?
It's my sister.
A Russian Spetsnaz soldier armed with Blaine's minigun from the original, played by Oleg Taktarov. The role is so important that they even give him a version of the iconic line. A future two-time Oscar winner, Mahershala Ali, plays an African warlord, and at the time, early in his career, he had not yet simplified his name. So, in the credits, he is listed as Mahershala Hajbaz. There's also the mandatory female lead, Isabel, played by Alice Braga, the only one who actually understands what's going on. She knows about the events of the first Predator and even names the exact country where it happened, Guatemala.
87 Guatemala.
And since Robert Rodriguez is producing, of course Danny Trejo has to show up. Funny enough, during casting, the role of the Mexican cartel enforcer was described as someone who looks like Danny Trejo. When Trejo saw that, he called Rodriguez and said, "You know, I look like Danny Trejo." And that's how he got the role. And the final member of the group, a seemingly ordinary doctor, played by Topher Grace. Turns out he's not there by accident, he's a serial killer. That is where the title has a double meaning. The predators are not just the Yautja, it's also the human characters. As the group moves across the unfamiliar planet, they encounter predators, or more specifically, super predators. So let's look at what new lore the 2010 film introduces. The characters were captured by a different kind of predator, one we have never seen before. They're bigger, stronger, use traps, and even hounds. And for some reason, that is never fully explained. They are at war with the original Yautja. They even use them as prey. In earlier script drafts, it was suggested that these super predators were genetically modified, collecting the strongest specimens across the universe and experimenting on them. That idea was dropped, but it will show up again later. We learned about this conflict from Nolan, played by Lawrence Fishburne, a survivor of previous hunts who adapted and went completely insane. A couple of years in isolation will do that to you. He does not get much screen time, but he is very memorable.
You live here?
Oh, no. This is my summer home. I winter in the Riviera.
So much so that Rodriguez even considered making a prequel about him. That idea faded away just as quickly as plans to continue Royce and Isabel's story. Yeah, those two are the only survivors. They defeat all the super predators. But unlike the classic Yautja code, these hunters clearly have no intention of letting anyone go. A small continuation was released in comic form where a four-armed predator is sent after Royce and Isabel. But after that, their fate remains unknown. The 2010 film is packed with references to the original 1987 movie by John McTiernan. Alan Silvestri's main theme follows the characters throughout. The sword fight between the Yakuza member and the predator mirrors Billy's death.
Billy! Billy, let's go!
The spine ripped from Walton Goggins' character echoes the trophy from the first film. Nolan even greets the group using Mac's lines. The quotes, the weapons, the overall tone. Antal and Rodriguez clearly tried to recreate the feel of the original, and to some extent they succeeded. The main issue is that the characters themselves are not as strong. They don't have enough time to develop or become as memorable as Dutch's team. Speaking of Dutch, once again, the filmmakers tried to bring Schwarzenegger back, at least for a cameo. He was even supposed to appear at the end of Alien vs. Predator, but only if he lost the California governor election. As you probably know, that did not happen. Several versions of his return were written for Predators, as a gladiator on Yautja Arena, or even as part of their hunting group. But without Arnold, those scenes just did not work, and he was not ready to leave the governor's office yet. The movie ends with Royce and Isabel watching a new batch of prey being dropped onto the planet, while Little Richard's Long Tall Sally plays, the same track Dutch's team listened to on their way to that fatal mission. Rodriguez and Antal were open to continuing the story, diving deeper into the Yautja clan, conflict, and expanding the scale. But 127 million reasons said otherwise. For a $40 million budget, that's not bad. but the studio wanted a real hit. So, once again, they started thinking about a reboot. And this time, someone stepped up, a successful screenwriter, the director of Iron Man 3, and the very first victim of Predator, Shane Black. In 2014, he starts developing his own fresh take on Predator. You would think that someone who was there at the birth of the legend understands exactly what audiences want.
Jeez, you got a big pussy. Jeez, you got a big pussy.
Yeah, Shane Black decides to lean fully into the tone and humor of his character Hawkins and makes a parody-style action comedy. All of Black's scripts, and he's a master of the buddy movie genre, are packed with incredibly witty characters who keep joking and throwing sharp one-liners even in the middle of a firefight. I love Kiss Kiss Bang Bang and The Nice Guys, his directorial works. Even Iron Man 3 is good for me. But what he did with Predator is like he took his signature style and cranked it up to 100. On the plus side, the movie starts fast and barely slows down. Sniper McKenna, played by Boyd Holbrook, witnesses a Predator ship crash during a military operation. The ship had been damaged in a fight with another Predator. Yes, even though Rodriguez's film never got a sequel, this one clearly follows in its footsteps. And Black himself says the story takes place in 2018. Now, pay attention, between Predator 2 and Predators, which means the 2010 movie maybe happens in the near future. So, among the Yautja, there is still a full-scale war going on, and we can learn a very important detail. Their goal is no longer just to improve themselves through hunting strong opponents. They want to become the dominant species in the universe through genetic engineering. So, now they're collecting DNA from the strongest creatures and experimenting on themselves. And this completely breaks the original image of the Predator as a brutal but honorable hunter, following a code, respecting strength, and dropping all weapons when facing a worthy opponent. Nope. Now they just want to inject themselves with the DNA of stronger beings and win everything that way. Like paying to win in a free-to-play game and instantly maxing out your stats. The whole idea of self-improvement through trial and combat just disappears. It turns out the Crash Predator is actually a hybrid of the Yautja and human. From here on, the Predator Man, basically. It can perfectly mimic human voices and adapt to situations. For example, it gives a thumbs up with a severed arm to avoid causing panic. And hey, speaking of thumbs up, don't forget to hit the like button so that I don't panic over here. This hybrid was heading to Earth to warn humanity and provide us with weapons to fight the Predators. Because the genetically enhanced Predators, the so-called upgrade Predators, are planning to invade Earth. That's where things go off the rails. Civil war among the Yautja, genetic experiments, and incoming large-scale invasion. That is a lot for a movie that is half filled with dirty jokes.
If your mom's vagina were a video game, it'd be rated E for everyone.
To fight back, McKenna assembles a team of mentally unstable ex-soldiers, along with a scientist studying alien life played by Olivia Munn.
You are one beautiful mother.
And by the way, she worked with Dr. Keyes, here played by Jake Busey, son of Gary Busey and apparently related to his character from Predator 2. And take a look at the background. You can spot Alexa Woods' spear from Alien vs. Predator. So, for Shane Black, the crossover is very much canon. You could say it's just an Easter egg, but we also see Françoise Yip, Miss Yutani from Requiem. Her role was originally bigger, but many scenes were cut so the story would not feel even more overloaded than it already is. The Predators are after McKenna's son, played by Jacob Tremblay, the kid who became famous after Room with Brie Larson. At the time, he was showing up everywhere. So yeah, young Rory, who has Asperger's, ends up playing around with Predator tech. Because of that, the Predator Man wants the gear back, while the upgrade Predator wants the kid's DNA as the smartest specimen available. Basically, the next step in evolution. Although, to be fair, it's not that hard to look like a genius when you are surrounded by these guys.
How do you circumcise a homeless man?
Here it comes.
Kick your mom in the chin.
On one hand, the team is genuinely entertaining. Thomas Jane and Keegan-Michael Key deliver a perfect bromance. Two soldiers, one who opened fire on his own squad, the other the only survivor of that incident. And they became friends because they kept sitting next to each other during court hearings. But not everyone here is fun and likable. There's also a human antagonist, Traeger, played by Sterling K. Brown, a ruthless, completely unprincipled villain. If I had to give out a Golden Predator Award for the most spectacular death, Traeger would definitely win. He straps a shoulder cannon onto himself, turns around, and accidentally blows his own head off. Honestly, I kind of agree with the upgrade predators. The kid really is the next step in evolution. Shane Black also cannot resist poking fun at the name Predator itself, pointing out that Hunter would actually be more accurate.
Well, we took a vote. Predator's cooler, right?
And in general, he jokes about pretty much everything from the previous films. Remember the predator hounds from Rodriguez's movie? One of them gets accidentally lobotomized and becomes a pet.
Here, boy. Fetch!
And what about Arnold's iconic line? Do not forget that choppa can also mean a motorcycle.
Get to the choppers!
So yeah, the final result feels weird. Jokes in an action movie are fine, of course, but there's a very thin line between comedy and parody, and not everyone can handle that transition from humor to drama. And at the same time, the movie is rated R, with tons of gore. Blood that looks about as realistic as in Deadpool. CGI blood and dirty jokes, that is Shane Black's idea of mature content. To promote the movie, they even released a puppet short where the Predator hunts Santa's reindeers. Plenty of blood and references included. The reception was also affected by two scandals. First, Shane Black cast a friend of his with a criminal past in a small role. Those scenes were later cut at the producer's request. Second, the film's loose and questionable portrayal of autism did not sit well with many people. The movie cost $88 million and made only $160 million. Shane Black originally wanted Dutch to return at the end of The Predator, flying in on a choppa and inviting the heroes to join him in a sequel. But Arnold refused. He did not want a cameo, only a full-scale role. So instead, the film ends with Holbrook's character preparing to face the Predator threat in a special Predator killer suit.
What is that? That's my new suit, Bubba.
Black planned to turn this into a full trilogy, but that did not happen. Fox lost its independence and was acquired by Disney. The new owners were not interested in building a big multi-film epic right away. For now, Predator would return as smaller standalone projects. First, prove the franchise can still make money, then maybe expand again. With The Predator, all the storylines about the Yautja Civil War, genetic experiments, and Earth invasion are quietly dropped. And in 2019, Dan Trachtenberg, director of 10 Cloverfield Lane, announces that he is working on a historical sci-fi action film called Skulls. Most people just shrugged. Okay, sounds interesting, but that working title was actually hiding the next entry in the Predator franchise. Dan Trachtenberg is a big fan of keeping secrets. Anyone who has seen his Cloverfield film remembers how skillfully he hid the core premise. And imagine how great it would have been if Predator had been kept secret until the very premiere. A sci-fi action movie from a seemingly solid director drops on streaming, and suddenly it turns out the main monster is one of the Yautja. Word of mouth would have exploded instantly. People would have rushed to watch a new movie about a creature they love and did not even expect to see again. But the resurrected studio, now called 20th Century Studios after the Disney acquisition, revealed everything in 2020. Trachtenberg was upset by that. He had been secretly working on his Predator since 2016, and there was a real chance it could have made it to release without being spoiled. But the studio revealed it without his involvement. The new film, which would define the direction of the franchise for the coming years, was titled Prey. The story takes place in the early 18th century in North America. Before this, there had already been several fan films about predators in the past. Dark Ages covered the Crusades. Celtic Days was set in the 18th century Ireland. And a short film called Warrior told the story of a Native American woman fighting a predator in the 16th century. Suspiciously similar to Prey, but according to Trachtenberg, his story had been in development even before Shane Black's The Predator. In any case, fans had already shown the potential of historical Predator stories, and now it was time for a full version with a $65 million budget. Although it skipped theaters and premiered on the Hulu streaming service, a fairly normal move for a film with uncertain box office prospects. And jumping ahead, Prey would become the most watched original project on the platform. Back to the story. A young Comanche woman named Naru, played by Amber Midthunder, wants to become a hunter but faces traditional resistance from her tribe because she's a woman.
Who invited you? We won't be gone long enough to need a cook.
And this is where things get interesting. Prey is not just the first Disney-era Predator in terms of production. It feels Disney in its storytelling as well. The main character is a mix of Pocahontas and Merida from Brave, someone who refuses to follow the expected role. She decides to prove her strength, leaves home, and puts her family at risk. It's basically a Disney animated story, just with some dismemberment. And what stands out is that the main character is not turned into a Mary Sue, someone who is perfect at everything. I know there is a different opinion online, but I still insist that her growth feels natural. She goes out to hunt a lion, and you would expect her to succeed and prove herself like a typical Mary Sue would. But she does not. Then she faces a bear one-on-one. That does not go well either. Yes, in the end she defeats the predator, but only at the cost of her brother's life, and after a long process of learning through trial and error. And of course, with the help of the wonderful dog, Sari. The dog survives just like Jonesy the cat in the first Alien, which automatically makes this a good movie in my book. Yes, animal survival is my personal quality metric. Although here only the dog gets a happy ending. Before getting to humans, the predator kills a lot of animals. But why hunt wolves or snakes when there are armed humans around? Initially, the idea was that this predator would be the very first Yautja to visit Earth. That's why it hunts anything that poses a threat, studying its future hunting ground. But the creators decided to step back from that idea. The franchise is in a fragile state. They needed to find a direction first before making definitive statements. Maybe later they will want to tell a story set before the 18th century, and Prey would have closed that door. So the hints remain, but nothing is confirmed. Its design is also different. Instead of the classic mask, it wears the skull of an alien creature. When designing this look, the creators followed one main idea: make it different from previous versions. The original Predator looked iconic, but audiences had gotten used to it, and it no longer created the same sense of fear. It was also important to reflect the historical setting, so the Predator's equipment looks more primitive compared to what we have seen before. And this is where questions start to appear. The Predators have starships capable of traveling across the galaxy, incredibly advanced camouflage and guided projectiles, but no familiar plasma weapons? The explanation that they simply had not been invented yet does not quite match the rest of their technological level. You could assume the Predator deliberately chose more primitive tools like a shield and spear to match its opponents, but even just the camouflage already puts it far above them. And spears are still used by predators in later periods anyway, so it's clear why the Predator is equipped this way, to match the setting, but logically it does not fully add up. Still, Prey turned out to be a strong film with great pacing and beautiful visuals. The untouched forests of North America contrast sharply with the brutal actions of French trappers, who leave behind dozens of skinned buffalo. It is not just a tense and violent action movie, but also a statement about humanity's impact on nature, inequality, and colonization. I'm ready for the angry comments about the strong female characters. Happy to discuss. Prey also includes a couple of references to earlier films. The first one is subtle. The filmmakers hinted in interviews that Taba, Naru's brother who dies, is essentially a reincarnation of Billy from the original film, which is why he accepts his fate as if repeating his ancestor's path. It's a bit of a stretch, but okay. And we also see how that same pistol eventually ends up in the hands of Lieutenant Harrigan in Predator 2. The main character gets it from one of the trappers, on whom she tests a cooling substance that lowers body temperature.
I can't see it.
Considering that she still has it at the end of the film, it raises concerns about her fate. Sooner or later, it has to fall into Yautja hands, and they will return for the Comanche. A short post-credits scene shows a large number of ships heading toward her tribe's settlement. The ancient Predator was killed by her, although mostly because of its own overconfidence. And now the other Yautja have clearly identified Earth as excellent hunting grounds. In the next project, Dan Trachtenberg will explore encounters with predators across different historical periods in more detail, and finally pull off the kind of audience surprise he could not achieve with Prey. In 2025, the animated film Predator: Killer of Killers is released. The trailers and description of the new project suggest something fairly simple: a small anthology about warriors from different eras fighting predators. First Vikings, then samurai, and finally World War II pilots. A project like that could have easily been released as a miniseries, similar to the recent Star Wars animated entries, Tales of the Jedi, Tales of the Sith, and so on. Short anthologies for fans filled with fan service. But Dan Trachtenberg decided to go further and hid the beginning of a much larger story inside a seemingly simple format. At first, the Vikings set out to avenge their enemies, but they are attacked by a predator, whom the Northerners naturally mistake for Grendel, the enemy of Beowulf from the famous epic. The main character, Ursa, defeats the creature in spectacular fashion, and it seems like it's time to move on to the next segment. But then we're shown that she and the samurai from the second story are being held in the same cell. Yes, this is not just a simple anthology made up of separate 20-minute episodes. Each segment introduces a new character, their skills, and their backstory, so that in the final act, all three can be brought together against a horde of Yautja. By the way, it is in Killer of Killers that this word finally appears on screen for the first time. Before that, the true name of the Predators was only in books and comics. Each segment is also notable for the fact that alongside the conflict with the Predator, it manages to develop the character and personal drama of its hero in a very short time. For example, the samurai Kenji was defeated by his brother and returns years later to take revenge. Not to kill him, but simply to prove his superiority. Both brothers are voiced by Louis Ozawa. You probably recognize him. Here he is in Predators by Nimrod Antal, playing the quiet Yakuza. After 2 stories focused on close combat, it might seem like the next one will just be a gunfight, but Trachtenberg surprises again by showing the first aerial battle in the franchise involving Predators. The Yautja rip engines out of World War II planes the same way they rip spines from human victims, and they are defeated only through the cleverness of the third protagonist of the final act, John Torres.
Come on, you son of a bitch! Shoot me down!
Pay attention to the fact that his commander is voiced by Michael Biehn, Kyle Reese from The Terminator, and Corporal Hicks from Aliens, which makes him the third actor to be killed by an alien, a Predator, and a Terminator.
Kill this motherfucker for me.
Even if the Predator kill did happen in animation, I would still say it counts. Then we learn a very interesting detail about the Yautja. It turns out that they abduct warriors who have defeated Predators and place them into cryosleep, so that years later they can thaw out these champions for new trials against the strongest opponents, which means that survivors from previous films could easily be stored somewhere in the Predator's collection and brought back in the future. This is a brilliant narrative solution. For example, if the audience wants to see a continuation of Naru's story from Prey. Without this cryosleep idea, the sequel would have to stay in the 18th century. Now she can be awakened during the Civil War, World War I, or most importantly, in the future. The writers have basically unlocked an endless source of possibilities for continuing the story, and the animated film ends on a cliffhanger. Ursa remains a prisoner of the Predators, Kenji is wounded, and we are shown a frozen Naru. When the Yautja offer Torres Rafael Adolini's pistol, questions immediately rise about Naru's fate. Did the Predators eventually reach her? Yes, they did. She's in captivity. But wait, that pistol later ends up with Mike Harrigan in Predator 2. Did they take it from him as well? About a month after the release of Killer of Killers on Hulu, the creators apparently thought they had not given fans enough surprises. So, in an updated version next to Naru, we also see Lieutenant Harrigan and Dutch himself from the original film. And this is actually great news, because realistically, due to the actor's age, bringing those characters back in live action would be very difficult. But animation makes it possible to create an epic crossover of the original heroes, something that previously existed only in fan fiction and in fans' imaginations. And honestly, that alone is enough to look forward to a continuation. Killer of Killers is definitely one of the best entries in the franchise since the original. Dramatic, full of fan service, and incredibly spectacular. Now all that remains is to support that momentum with a full-feature film. And Dan Trachtenberg is going to deliver Badlands, a true betrayal of everything fans of the franchise expect. And that is the paradox. You can actually get a lot of enjoyment out of Badlands. You just have to accept a few conditions, and they might be a bit difficult for fans of the past films. Because when I called Prey a Disney-style Predator, I did not even realize just how close Badlands would get to that status. After the success of his first film in this universe, Dan Trachtenberg was given a blank check by the studio and started developing 3 projects at once. The first made it to the screen as the animated Killer of Killers. The third is still unknown, and the second one is Badlands. The studio even put 2 of these projects into production at the same time, loading Trachtenberg so heavily that he had to turn down directing an episode in the final season of Stranger Things. As a nod to that, he invited the Duffer Brothers, the showrunners behind Hawkins, to appear in Badlands. They voiced the main character's onboard computer with heavily altered voices. Let's get to the setup. The director got tired of one recurring issue in Predator films. Why do the greatest hunters in the universe keep losing to humans? What is so great about them then? So he decided to make the Yautja win. But you cannot just set them loose on positive characters either. That would turn the movie into a simple slasher where the villain wins. At first, Trachtenberg considered sending a Predator after Nazis during World War II, but then he found a more interesting solution, one that would not only turn his Predator into something closer to Terminator 2, meaning a more or less positive central character, but also satisfy an important demand from the studio, a PG-13 rating. In the distant future, further than any Alien or Predator film, according to the creators, a Yautja hunts on a remote planet populated by all kinds of monsters and synthetic beings studying them. You can cut them, tear them apart, melt them with acid, and no blood will spill, which makes it rating friendly. It does not matter that they look human. What matters is that inside they have milky fluid, which means no matter what happens to them, kids will not be traumatized for life. See? Not shocking at all. I hope so. On a planet that strongly resembles Harry Harrison's Death World, a young Yautja named Dek arrives. He's not very impressive physically. His father would sooner strangle him in his sleep than let him prove himself. And do not let Dek's broken tusk confuse you. According to the director, this is not Broken Tusk, the comic book character who interacted with the first human accepted by the Yautja, Machiko Noguchi, whom I mentioned earlier. This detail is there to show that Dek is not a typical predator. He's a flawed one, at the cost of his loving brother's life. Yes, that is what Yautja are like now. Dek gets a chance to capture an invincible creature on Jenna, to earn full acceptance into the clan. After Prey, it seems like the new direction of the franchise would be grounded. Standalone encounters with predators who were once again scary and threatening. But Trachtenberg, who clearly enjoys misleading the audience, went in a completely different direction. He chose to explore the everyday life of the Yautja and remind us that they are intelligent beings. So, for the first time in the entire screen history of the franchise, the Predator becomes the main character. Linguist Britton Watkins developed a fully functional language for the species. He studied under Paul Frommer, who famously created the Na'vi language for Avatar. Now the creators are focusing on building the culture of this hunting race. A very interesting direction, which immediately raises a serious concern. We'll get into that in a moment. Dek is accompanied by half of a synthetic named Thea, played by Elle Fanning.
Hi.
While the main antagonist is also Elle Fanning, but as another synthetic named Tessa. Through interacting with her, the main character learns what a pack is, and that a true alpha predator protects those close to him. Wait, what? Are we really watching a Predator movie about these creatures? Yes, in the hands of the new rights holders, Predator has become something it clearly was never meant to be. The franchise has turned into a family blockbuster, bright, charming, exciting, and very funny. The humor is supported by an incredibly cute creature named Bud.
Thanks, Bud. I'm good.
If you came to see Predator the way it was in the 1980s or even the 2010s or even in Prey, you are in for a serious disappointment. If you came for a bright, charming, and very funny blockbuster, you'll enjoy what you see. Even some of the narrative shortcuts that simplify the protagonist's journey do not get in the way. I would even go further. They turn him into a Marty Stew, the male version of a Mary Sue. Yes, I believe Naru from Prey is a well-earned character, but Dek from Badlands is clearly overpowered. The moment he realizes that an acid snake likes berries, he immediately tames it. They become so close that the creature sacrifices itself to save him. The very first alien he meets turns out to be the descendant of an ultra-powerful being. And once he returns home, Dek suddenly defeats everyone in his path, even though he was a weakling before. Like I said, convenient, but also entertaining, charming, and fun. The fight between Elle Fanning's two halves against other synthetics is honestly one of the best action scenes of 2025. Seriously.
Good job.
But to really enjoy it, you have to accept this new Predator as something closer to Terminator 2, turning a brutal slasher into a more emotional, family-oriented story with a surprisingly lovable non-human lead. I'm not criticizing Terminator 2, I'm just pointing out the difference in tone between installments. And I'm not saying these films are comparable in quality. The direction is very similar. The only thing that raises concern is where this approach might logically lead. A civil war among the predators and the replacement of their brutal traditions with simple family values? You have to admit that is the most obvious direction for a softened predator. The film ends with Dek defeating his father, but then his mother arrives for the final confrontation.
More friends of yours?
So, for future Predator projects, we now have the following setup. Dek, Thea, and Bud form a new clan and prepare to shake up Yautja Prime. At the same time, Torres and Kenji escape from the Predator arena, while Ursa, Naru, Mike Harrigan, and Dutch Schaefer remain in cryosleep. A very solid foundation for the third project Trachtenberg has planned. And that's not all. The synthetics in Badlands work for the Weyland-Yutani Corporation. Yes, the same one from Alien, even though the events take place after Alien Resurrection. In that film, it was stated that Weyland-Yutani had been bought out by Walmart. Apparently not. If you look closely at the moment when Thea switches into a dormant state, you can see the corporation's logo, just like Andy's in Alien Romulus. Trachtenberg saw a test screening of Romulus, liked that detail, and asked Fede Alvarez for permission to include similar eyes in his film. Officially, Alien and Predator now exist in the same universe, even if the xenomorphs have not appeared yet. Trachtenberg and Alvarez do not want the first real encounter between these iconic creatures to just be a small Easter egg. It needs to give you chills. And if you look at Dek's ship, you can spot a Tyrannosaurus skull. I would definitely watch a crossover with Jurassic Park, Ian Malcolm, and a Predator fighting dinosaurs. There's even an alien skull from Independence Day. Imagine Will Smith and Dek in aerial combat. Honestly, a better sequel than the real Independence Day 2. In the end, Badlands became the highest-grossing film in the franchise, making $184 million worldwide. But with a budget of $105 million, it's hard to call it a clear success. Still, the rights holders have not lost faith in Predator, and Trachtenberg's mysterious third project has not been cancelled. In any case, the film is not a complete disaster. Like John Carpenter's The Thing was at the time of its release, a failure that later became a legendary masterpiece. In the next video, we will talk about the adaptations of that cult story. The Predator franchise needs to keep evolving, even if it moves in a more entertaining, family-oriented direction. For years, Predator tried to become a successful franchise but kept running into problems and failures. If neither Shane Black nor Robert Rodriguez nor the Alien crossovers could make it work, then maybe this is the direction worth exploring. And most importantly, the films are finally trying to become a unified, connected universe. Even though I'm very sensitive to the devaluation of expanded material, the words Star Wars still bring a tear to my eye. In the case of Predator, a reboot and a more linear narrative might actually be the right move. Previous creators never really tried to connect the films beyond references and cameos. They kept changing the rules of the world, constantly trying new approaches. But maybe Predator as a film franchise needs order, something that reflects the culture and code of the Yautja themselves. And if no one has really tried that before, maybe now's the time. Maybe Disney will fail. And looking at some of their recent results, that is entirely possible. But I do not agree with the line the characters in this series keep repeating.
If it bleeds, we can kill it.
Predator may be bleeding, culturally speaking, but as an idea, it cannot be killed. The next video is already on screen. Go ahead and keep watching. Thanks for watching. This is 11 Slate.